Hi, welcome to my blog. My name is Tom Chu, and today we're going to do a member requested tutorial. Brian Watson, he was the winner of the contest I had. I asked a question on one of my posts. It was portrait lighting patterns and lighting ratios explained. It asked you to look at an image, and this was the image here. Let me pull it up for you. Asked you to look at this image, and here's the question. The image looks good at first glance, but as you can see, but can you see what's wrong with the lighting? Please post your guess below and win a free set of my very own unreleased beta version Lightroom presets, which, Brian, I'm still putting the finishing touches on to get you a little better set than what I was going to originally give you. So Brian found the problem. The problem is the shadow is on the side of the nose instead of the edge of the lip. Okay? We want to keep our nose shadows down in the laugh line area of the mouth, stop at the side of the lip. So there you go. Good job, Brian. And Brian asked me, how did I create this image from this image? He said the one with the finger. I knew which one he meant. So there's lots of ways you can do this. So let's just jump right into Photoshop, and I'll show you a quick and dirty way that you can do this with try to keep this tutorial kind of short, so if I don't get the exact result I did before, please forgive me. However, we'll get pretty close. When you do custom stuff like this, it's a one-off deal, and each one of these are just continuing evolution of editing. Okay, that was the side-by-side, and then I evolved and did like a spotlight effect with a darker vignette, because I'm going to put it in an oval frame with a black border. I wanted that gradient to transition into black. That's why I did that. So anyways, what we'll do is we'll start off, we'll send this image into Photoshop. So that's Control E if you're in Lightroom, or Command E on the Mac, and I'll hand that file right into Photoshop. So when you're working in Photoshop, you have to remember there's about 20 ways to do the same thing. For example, if I want to the idea is we want to get her on a consistent background. This was a workshop where my friend Jim Smelzner was pointing out some lighting pattern information, and I was taking the pictures. It was at Photoshop World, and that's Jimmy's finger there. One of the ways we could get rid of this finger is we could grab our lasso tool and just select it, and if you hit Edit, Fill, Content Aware, you click OK, and it will go away. Control D or Command D will deselect. Finger's gone. That's how quick that is. However, since that finger's not really in the way for what we're doing, that really doesn't matter. So we're going to Control Z. We'll bring that finger back. So there it is. So the whole idea is we need to put her on a background that's consistent. Maybe this white background. This is a scrim gem, and then a black backdrop. And her hair is kind of the trouble area. So we can make a selection. One of the quick ways I like to make a selection is with the pen tool, and I'll show you how to do that. So we make this selection, we just click here and just keep clicking around her until we have our selection. See, if we make a mistake here, you see the plus symbols under the brush, that means we can click there and create another point, but the point's in our arm. If we hit the Control key, and that's the Command key on the Mac, we can move this point wherever we want. Okay, so let's move this around here. Let me zoom in here and see what's going on. As I'm on these handles, there's a Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, back out. So we're going to add our point, and then I'm going to hold down the Control key and move it wherever I like. Okay, that's how you can reposition these points. Now let's do a little bit, and I'll pause it, and I'll finish up. So you just go around here. We're not worrying about her hair. We're worried about her face. We're not worried about the earring. Okay, so you get the kind of idea. So we'll just go up here a little bit, and we'll make this selection. The whole idea is we're just trying to get her on a white background. So I'm going to pause the video, and we'll be right back. Okay, so now we've got to a point where we've made a selection from side to side. So we say, if I should make another point here just to show you where we're at. And if we just come over here to this side, to this point, you see we get a circle. That means it's closing that loop. Okay? So now that we've closed the loop, with the pen tool, we've created a path with the pen tool, and we can make a shape out of it, we can make a mask out of it, or we can make a selection. So we're going to not add any feathering to that. So we have our selection. And if we wanted to, but it's not critical in this case, I'll show you how you can make the selection a little bit better. Say we didn't get good on the hair. So we go to Selection, Refine Edge, and this is an edge selection tool. It's a refine radius tool. We click this, and now we can just go in and paint. And Photoshop will just refine the selection for us. Okay, so if we say feather, it'll clean up those jaggedy lines that we had. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and clean that up. And say if we missed a little bit on the arm, no, we look good there. Let's say if we wanted to get tighter there. Okay, that'll tighten up. So we want to tighten up around this neck and this shoulder a little bit. You see, this is how you can refine your edge. Okay, so that's enough for there. We're going to click OK. So we have this selection made. Okay, so we're going to save it so we can use it. So let's zoom a little bit so we can see everything. So we'll go Selection, Save Selection, and we'll just call it All Over. Just call it All Over. That's just so you can remember what selection that is. So we hit Control D, we can load that selection at any time. Select, Load Selection, and we call it the All Over. Click OK, and there's our selection. We're going to use that in a minute. So what we want to do is we want to keep this as our safety net. We're going to hit Control J or Command J to duplicate the layer. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to create a layer that's full of the background that we want to use. Okay, so let's go ahead and make these default by hitting the D key. We'll make our chips default, and let's make a new layer. Okay, so it's an empty layer, and we're gonna go ahead and fill it with the paint bucket tool. So we'll grab the paint bucket tool here. We're going to grab this paint chip, and we're going to use the eyedropper tool to select this background to give us the color that we want. And now we're just going to fill this layer with paint. Okay, so that layer's full. And now we're going to use our selection to paint away in a layer mask. So we're going to add a layer mask to this. We're going to hold down the Alt key, and the Alt key is the Option key on the Mac. And we're going to hit the layer mask icon, and it loads it and hides it for us. Okay, so now we want to paint, but we don't want to paint on her. We just want to paint in the background without getting on her. So what we'll do is we'll go Selection, Load Selection, and you have to be on this layer here, on this mask. So Selection, Load Selection. We're going to select the overall that we created. Okay, and we're going to invert the selection. That's Control Shift I or Command Shift I on the Mac, and we're just going to go in and paint in white on the mask, and it will reveal what we dumped paint on in these black areas without painting on her. So we'll grab our brush tool and we start to paint. Let's get our opacity up. If you use 1 through 10 in your keyboard, 0 being 100, 1 being 10, you can jump through your opacity real quick. So we're going to grab 100%, and we're just going to go ahead and paint right in there, and it won't let us paint inside the area where we have it masked off. So it just makes a quick work of trying to get rid of all that stuff. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and clean that that hair up a little bit more. Actually, I'm going to take off this hair right here. Zoom out and get this hair and earring cleaned up. There's no sense in having to do that twice. So we're going to hit deselect, Control D or Command D on the Mac, and we'll zoom in. And you see this hair on the mask. Let's just go ahead and add some more gray up here, and we'll just take it off and clean this up. So we're going to hold the X key, and we're going to tighten our brush up. Okay, you can do that by sliding how hard it is here, but I like to see what it is, and that's Control Alt on Windows, Command Option on a Mac, and you slide left to right or up and down. The size is left to right, and the feathering or the hardness of the brushes up and down. So I don't want a really soft brush. I want kind of like a medium brush. So I'm going to come back in here and I'm just going to paint away where it's fuzzy right on the hair. And since this is going to be black and white and we're going to have some gradients on it, this is not real critical. It just wants to look, you know, like her hair. But we don't want all those flyaways that she had. Let me just X this. Okay. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now we have her on the background. Let's go ahead and soften her skin. But before we do that, let's combine all the work we've done into one working layer. To do that, it's on Windows, Alt Control Shift E, or Option Alt Shift E on a Mac, and it creates a new layer with everything in one layer. So if we close these layers, you can see that there's our working file. This is the completed layer with all the information on it, and we still have our layer masks and everything to work with. So let's hit the zoom tool to scale out so we can see. Zoom with the Alt, and the Alt is Option, and you click, you'll get the minus sign, and there we are. So I won't take time to do skin softening quite yet. I'll just do that in a minute. So in order to get it to be black and white, you can desaturate, you can do lots of things, but I like to use a plug-in from Nik Software, and it is Silver Efex Pro 2. And if you click on the Vintage tab, you'll see this one that says Antique Plate. Okay, so there's our antique plate. And I'm going to do some adjustments because it's a little bit too bright and it's too contrasty. I like to have it a little bit finer. However, there's some grain applied. And if you move it to the left, you see you can get really grainy. If we move it to the right, we can remove the grain. And you can make it soft or hard on that grain. So I want to make it soft. Okay. Now let's come up here and let's play with some of these controls on the structure. The highlights, so you can make it, the face, the highlights pop out more, or we can soften them. So I'm going to soften because we're working under the structure. In these shadows, we can make them more predominant or softer. So I want it to be a little softer, and same with the midtones. So I'm going to soften everything up there. I can amplify the whites to make the image not look so contrasty. You know, have it a little softer. Okay, and then I can do soft contrast. Let's pull these whites down a little bit. This is a really great plugin, and I'm not going to match the original image exactly because I don't have any reference in front of me, one, and two, it's just a one-off kind of deal. But if I worked with smart objects, everything I did could stay in the file, and it could be go back and change just the dynamic brightness or the soft contrast just until it was identical. So if I knew that I was trying to match something, I would be working with smart objects. So there's dynamic brightness. Okay, so we can, this is all brightness. So let's pull up these midtone. Let's look at that. There we go. This is like that pencil drawing that he's talking about. So we pull those shadows out a little bit. Maybe pull our midtones back just a little bit. We'll put our highlights up. Let me bring that amplify whites down. And this is just, you just have to feel it. You know, when you think it's done, it's done. Okay, so that's pretty close. I think it's a little too bright. I think we need to bring those blacks back in just a hair, and some of these midtones and shadows just a little bit. Okay, so we're going to call that done. We can also add a vignette. So one of the ones that I like to use is this lens fall off, but it just doesn't look right on this image. So we'll make our own custom vignettes in Photoshop. So we'll click OK. So it's going to bring that image in. I'll pull up Lightroom and see how close we are. The Nik Software takes a while to load, so let's take a peek where we were. Okay, so that's, hey, that looks pretty darn close. Let's pull back up Photoshop. Nick is still thinking. It'll load up. I'll pause it. Okay, so it loaded the image. So there's the one from Lightroom, and there's the one that I just created. So it's not identical, but it's pretty close. So let's go ahead and drop this back down. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create some vignettes. So we're going to use the curve tool to do that. But before we do that, we'll make a selection with the, this is going to be the marquee selection toolbox. So we're going to just drag a rectangle in the middle somewhere. It doesn't have to be perfect. So we'll go select and refine edge. And let's feather that. That looks pretty good. And let's shift the edge a little bit out. Click OK. And we need to invert it, because if I apply a curves to it, everything inside the box, here I'll show you. If I just applied the curves to it, it's just going to affect the inside. I want the exact opposite. So we'll go Control Z again. And we're going to hit Control Shift I or Command Shift I on the Mac. And see, now the marching ants are on the outside edge. So when I make my curve selection now, it's only going to affect the outside. Okay? So I'm going to bring this up just a hair. And if you don't like your point, you can just drag it off. So I want to bring the shadows down a little bit. I want to increase the highlights just a hair. Alright. There's our first curves adjustment. So I'm going to come back down here again. I'm going to grab another curves adjustment. And in this one, I'm just going to darken the image overall. So what I wanted to do was get that white fall off around her. I wanted it to go away, but I wanted to bring back some information on that portrait because it was looking a little soft. So there's our next curves adjustment. Okay, and we're going to do yet another curves adjustment. Now look at the file size. We started with 83 megs and we're at 401 megs. So when we do curves adjustments, it doesn't take a lot of data, so it won't make that jump. So we'll hit curves again. Actually, let's make a selection on this one. Selection. So we're going to refine edge again. And I'm going to feather it a little bit more. I'm going to shift the edge out. I'll click OK, and I'm going to drag this down to center it just a hair. We're going to invert it again. That's Control Shift I or Command Shift I on the Mac. And this time, instead of making it darker, we're going to make it taller. Ooh, that's not right. I'm going to hit a curves tool and we're going to make it darker on this edge. Not a lot of information, so it's going to kind of get yellow on the edge, and that's kind of where we were at. Now if we want to do that peek through with the I think it's a little too yellow. Let's just pull the shadow down. I want it to be more like a cream color. Okay, so there we have our selection. So we'll turn this one off and you see it's just a subtle change, but it's a transition over top of a transition. So you get these complex gradient transitions. So this last thing I like to do to create this image, which was my final effect of this image, because I'm going to frame it on black, is to do these two more curves that are going to make it look like a spotlight kind of was on her to a dark gradient fall off. So we'll just grab this one, this layer, and we'll just do curves. Okay, and on this curves adjustment, I'm just going to grab right on the right hand side and I'm going to bring it down to like under halfway. That's halfway. This is under halfway. Okay, and I'm going to use the paintbrush tool and paint on that mask. I need to invert it and paint in black, so we hit the X key and the B key to bring up the brush, and I want a soft brush. Okay, so it's really soft, and I want my opacity to be somewhere around 40. So with this selected, I'm just going to paint right inside of here and open up some of that information, kind of like a spotlight hitter. And this is, up to you completely how this looks. And if you get too much, you just hit the X key and go back and paint it in and start over. Hit the X key again and get rid of it. Just kind of wash it off. And if you think it's too much, you can grab your opacity slider and drag it down. Okay. So we're just going to leave it back up. And I'm just going to come over right on this eye and open this eye up. Just a little bit there. Alright. And now to make the edges go really dark, we're just going to do our famous vignette with the curves. So we're going to go ahead and just make a selection right in the middle. We're going to refine the edge. Select, refine edge, feather. Shift it out a little bit because it's going to shrink. Okay. Select OK. Invert the selection. Control Shift I, Command Shift I. Hit our curves tool again. And if we pull it down, it just gets really dark. So we'll put it right here on the edge. And there you have it. That's one way to do it. Now what I did before was I went in and painted on the mask. Okay, so I want to paint black. X. Brush tool with the B. And I brought in that vignette a little bit here around the edges. So it was a little darker. So it was a little smoother transition between that edge. So this can get kind of complex with these curves, but you see that the file didn't get that much bigger with all of these curves layers. So let's break it down to where we had it. Let's bring this one to the top and bring this one underneath. Actually, let's go back. Once you set them in place, they start, working in certain ways that you don't want to manipulate them. So this was that spotlight tool. That spotlight. This was the vignette that I created overall. So we take that off first. Then that was the spotlight effect. This was a subtle vignette for transition in color and gradient. This was another vignette. This was a reverse to the lightning vignette that I added. That was a white. Take that off. That was the Silver Efex Pro. This was the layer that we created combining all of our work up to that point. This was the mask that we created based on our selection, that we went in and painted inside the selection and it didn't let us paint onto our subject. And this was our duplicate layer for our background. There you have it. 23 minutes, 47 seconds, and we're done. I want to thank you for visiting my blog today, and until next time, we'll see you soon.